Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is your boy Jarrell Mason, better known as Jay Mason. Welcome to another episode of Beyond the Album Cover, where we get inside the entertainment industry with those in the know and give them their flowers. Why are they here to be celebrated? With me, I have a native of the 252, Weldon, North Carolina. Got his PhD in
Mm.
2019 from Virginia Tech in sociology with a concentration in Africana Studies. He's currently the assistant professor in the Department of Sociology and Africana Studies at Tulane University in New Orleans, Louisiana. Go Green Wave. And he just published his book, Vibe, Raw Black Aesthetics and Racialized Emotions in the Carceral South. Wherever books are sold, get it, hardback, paperback, and digital. Dr. Corey Miles is in the building. Dr. Miles, thank you for coming on Beyond the Album Cover, sir.
Hey, nah, I appreciate that introduction. Like it's sometimes just like hearing about yourself. Like, oh shit, yeah, I did do that. Sometimes I appreciate the intro, and I'm excited. Yeah, I don't get to talk to folks from 252 that often, at least about the work stuff. So I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on, and I hope you're having a better week than my man up in Canada, because Canada is taking L's right now. So, what's your take on what's going on with BBL Drizzy and Kendrick?
Oh wow, I mean, yeah, I mean, so I don't know if I got anything like insightful to say, but no, yeah, I think when it's interesting, I think hip hop is competitive, so I like the competition. But for me, what's interesting is that I think the fact that Drake could even be in a beef with Kendrick Lamar to me kind of solidifies his like stamp in hip hop because like Kendrick Lamar wouldn't beef with me because like I'm a nobody, right? And then I think the fact that right Kendrick Lamar and Drake can have a beef, I think speaks to a type of prominence I think Drake has that I wouldn't have imagined like 10 years ago, like a biracial Canadian having in hip hop. But yeah, but like I think like Kendrick obviously like winning the beef, but no, I think it's interesting and it's fun and yeah.
Yeah, Not Like Us is definitely a West Coast bop that makes somebody want to sea walk. Don't do that if you're not affiliated. Don't be carrying no rags and saying B's or C's, because saying in the wrong part, like they say in the wood, you mess around, say some stuff that gets you shot. And just a
Oh yeah.
disclaimer, Big Mike did not represent for all of us North Carolinians in that movie. I just want to put that out there.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah, man. So let's just go ahead and start from the beginning. Coming from the 252, who was it that put that battery in your back to pursue academia to where you went to Virginia Tech and got your PhD in 2019?
No, yeah, I appreciate that question. Really, so a few years back, I was invited to be the graduation speaker at Weldon High School, where I graduated from, and the speech was essentially about exactly the question you're asking me to where so my grandma who didn't have formal education, right? I think like beyond like middle school. And so like the speech was centered on I would get invited to give a graduation speech because I have a PhD, but the person who didn't have formal education, who raised me to get a PhD, we don't invite that person. Because to me, I think it's a little bit more difficult, right, to have the genius, to have the insight without lack of education, without the funding, to see a black boy through to a PhD. And to me, I think it's something about that genius. But yes, I'm gonna say like my granny, my mama, to where I think they allowed me space to ask questions and think and to dream. And even though they didn't have all the money in the world, they had enough to where I didn't have to be overburdened by financial things to where I had space to kind of ask questions about the world. Because to me, that's what the PhD allows you to do, just ask questions. And so yeah, so I'm always saying my mama, my granny, and yeah, and allow me just to think and to dream. And yeah, so I'm gonna have to shout them out when towards that question.
Yeah, and coming from our area, the 252 is rural northeastern North Carolina, where tobacco, agricultural, farm was the main industry, textiles. And for those of you that remember the movie Normal Ray back in '79 that Sally Field won an Oscar for, it was
Mhm.
based off of Crystal Sutton over when it was the J.P. Stevenson's textile plant over in Roanoke Rapids. My granddad was
Mhm.
actually a machine operator at that particular J.P. Stevens plant. But of course, once NATO hit in '90, a lot of those textile jobs went away. So the only
Mhm.
really source of employment in our area was you were working at Patch Rubber, you were working at Champion, formerly International Paper, now Capstone,
Yep.
Kennametal, or any other job that screams manual physical labor, because you knew if you were academically gifted, you got to make a way out of there, because that wasn't the life that you wanted, you know.
Yeah. No, yeah. Like my mother, she spent her life working at Halifax Linen, so at the linen plant. And yeah, and to me, like I think at least what I learned from her and kind of like the type of work she did, kind of like shapes how I do my work to where she worked at the linen factory, but who she was as a human being wasn't determined by that. And so for me, even though like I'm a professor, I work at a university, I still try to think about myself as a human being first, as a black person first. And like even though like I work in a university, right? I don't think that's the most important part of my identity. And so yeah, which is why I appreciate this because I get to talk to my people. And I think the most important piece of me is that I don't know. I think I'm 252 to the core, and I think right I resonate with folks in the 252. Like that's where I had the most fun. That's where the people I love are at, and yeah.
Yeah, my stepdad, he worked at Patch Rubber and Champion, and I saw him when he would work those 12 and 12 shifts, go in at 7, come on at 7 p.m., and then vice versa. And mom made sure the food was ready for him to go to work, and just how that smell of that meal, while for some it's a distinct smell, it's a smell that
Yeah.
most people wouldn't want to smell. But for me, when I first moved away from home and I traveled
Hmm.
back, I told my cousin, roll down that window so I could smell that meal. Because it just reminded me of home and what
Yeah.
is still there. Because had that meal closed, then our little area would be in real dire straits as far as the economy
Hmm.
goes. But at least you got Lowe's Improvement Distribution. You have Reese's, I believe, out on 903 in Halifax. And
Hmm.
you know how, like I was saying earlier, the whole piece of physical labor doesn't really give you as an academic the chance to say, hey, I need to expand my horizons beyond 252. I want to see something bigger than that. So I knew, I had to go to school, had to make my way. And that's, for me personally, that's how I ended up at UNCG.
Yeah. Nah, yeah, it's interesting. So in the book, because I think part of like the questions is like, where's the South? And right, and so some people might say like Virginia isn't the South, or even like Miami isn't the South, and like people have like real rigid conceptualizations of like what and where the South is. And part of what I said is, you in the South when you standing at a bus stop and you can smell a paper mill. So where like to me that's like a real Southern thing, right? To where like part of like to me what it means to be southern isn't necessarily kind of what the map says, but like to your point, like what does it smell like? What does it feel like? What type of work are people doing? How do people relate to each other? And yeah, and part of the rural South is this difficult thing to where I think a lot of us love where we come from, but just the kind of economic structure of it, like there are no right work for folks, right? So if you get like an engineering degree, right? So for me, I got a PhD sociology. I mean, I would love to work in a 252, but it just ain't no places to work. Maybe if I got a job like ECU, right, I could be in a 252 working. But yeah, but just thinking about so many of us have to move away from home and thinking about like what does it mean to carry home with us? Like what does it mean to be of and from the 252 when if we want like a decent life, right, we can't live there. And then what does it mean then to actually make that place a place that's livable for people with like college degrees? And like, what does it look like to invest and to reimagine kind of that region in a way to where now I
Yeah.
think most folks that live there are kind of like older. And so younger folks are kind of moving out and the population is going down. And so for me, I think like, what's the future of the 252? And then like, what does it demand of me to kind of, right, reimagine like how people move and live and exist there?
Yeah, and you spoke about in the book about the performative piece that you have to play when you come from small rural South and then you go away to the city and then you come back home. And then some folks who have never been outside of the rural area tend to think, oh, you too good for us now? You don't eat
Yeah.
this no more? You don't wear this no more? Where you asking that? You've been hanging around those folks
Yeah.
too much. So it's like that delicate dance that you got to
Mhm.
dance when you're trying to live within two worlds, but knowing that one may not accept you because of your past, and one may not accept you because of where you're from, and they seeing that you're trying to assimilate in a world that really wasn't built for you to begin with.
Yeah. Nah, because I think in the book I say something like how people say, "Oh, you good with them books," or something like that, and this idea of that, right? I think I've learned to enunciate my words in a way that academia is legible to them, that I can. And for me, like being good with them books was like folks saying, "You book smart in a way that you can survive a world, right, that demands kind of like whiteness, that demands like a type of performance in a way." And this idea that, right, so what does it mean when we do straddle those two worlds, to where my accent comes out more when I talk to people from home than when like I'm at work in a way that I'm not conscious of. And what does it mean? Then for me, it's to kind of make those things both legible. That's what I try to do in the book. So in the book, it's like slang from the 252, but I'm also going to use words like epistemological, because like when I talk in my everyday life, I use kind of like Southern slang, and I also use academic words. And so for me, it's like trying to think about, is, I guess, like an academic type of vocabulary that's not necessarily not congruent with the 252. And so it's not that being from the 252, the folk don't use those words. And like, what does it mean to kind of make a rural academic South legible? Like, what does it mean to kind of show folks from the rural South actually building theory, actually talking about really complicated things, right? Whether we use the big words or not, and yeah, and that's part of the work I try to do in the book, and with some personal stories, with stories of folks who I interviewed and worked with.
Yeah, so you're pretty much living in a dual consciousness, and how, being from our area, excuse me, you had to make your own fun, because if you were not a Roanoke Rapids resident, you couldn't go to TJ Davis. You couldn't go to the library. You didn't have access to the same
Yeah,
things that folks in Roanoke Rapids were. You had to go hone your basketball game out on the concrete or out on somebody's dirt path somewhere. And there was no blood, no foul either.
yeah, and to me, I think that's something in the book that I think is one of my favorite parts, that people don't. I mean, unless you're from the 252, you really want to pick that piece up to where, yeah, where I talk about TJ Davis, and I kind of use the analogy that, right, the black kids were so good at basketball because we had to play in the double realms outside. And it's just like a different type of orientation to the sport, where for folks who don't know, right, in Runner Rapids, in Halifax County, if you got a Runner Rapids ID, you can go to TJ Davis. But if you like Weldon, Gaston, Garrisburg, literally 3 minutes down the road, you can't go there, right? And for me, that's a racialized type of process, to where Runner Rapids, right, overrepresented by white folks, these surrounding towns, right, overrepresented by black people. And so we ain't gonna say black folks can't come to TJ Davis. What we gonna say is, if you're from one of these black cities, towns, that you just can't come. And so for me, I try to use kind of basketball as a way in which to talk about segregation in the rural South, to where in a lot of ways, right, we're just as or more segregated today than we were historically, right? And thinking about how something as simple as my form for my jump shot, right, demonstrates how segregation works, because right, I got to play on the concrete, I got to be outside, and we just develop a different type of style. And so thinking about style and performance as these entry points into these larger type of racialized things.
Yeah, because I went to Squire Elementary in Gaston from fourth to fifth grade, and how we didn't have a basketball goal outside for recess. We had to play on the monkey bars, and you would use a dodgeball. You had to
Yeah.
get in where you fit in. Same thing when I was at Aurelia Springs Elementary. You had to make do with what you had. But being from Gaston, from Runner Rapids, two different experiences growing up. Because where I lived in Runner Rapids is over by P&J Trailer Court. And
Mhm.
boy, P&J was rough. I've seen plenty of times where the cops will pull over somebody by the side of the house, seeing somebody
Yeah.
get put in them silver bracelets. But really, the straw that really brought those camels back with my folks, it was a Thanksgiving where my mom and I went down to Georgia to spend Thanksgiving with my relatives. My stepdad had to work at the mill, and we
Mm-hmm.
ended up getting hit up. They snuck through my room, stole my piggy bank, some of my mama's jewelry. Then my stepdad was
Wow.
like, we gotta go back to gas. And so that's what had me move back to gas, and I finished out third grade at the Radio Springs and then went back to
Yeah.
Spire starting fourth grade year. But yeah, 252 life, it ain't for the weak. It'll teach you something. Like I didn't go around welding like that. I only knew the projects because I would pass by the projects going on 301. That's the only thing I knew about welding. I ain't know nothing about any other parts of welding. So explain to us a little bit about what was life like for you growing up in welding.
Yeah. So I mean, so just like think about like demographically, I think maybe the city, what I'm gonna call it a city, but it's a town, city of Weldon, maybe like 90, 95% black. I think it might have been like maybe two non-black people at my high school. And I think folks don't realize that the rural South is like a really rough place to where I think major cities get kind of the reputation of being like tough. But the rural South is if you got like concentrated poverty, which comes with all the things like the crime, right, the violence. And then I think what makes the rural South complicated is that everybody knows each other. So then so then like the cycle of violence, right, continues because I think in the book I talk about when somebody's like murdered in the area, it's not necessarily a question of am I going to know the person because typically you are right. You're going to be connected to them in some way since there's not that many folks, and so for me, I think the rural South has all these structural disadvantages that like urban spaces have, but without but in an intimate way to where if somebody in Weldon was shot or murdered today, I would know them or know of them. My brother would probably know them, and then that fractures a city, right? Where
Mhm.
it divides the city. Where I talk about in the book when Amp was murdered, to where that we was only a couple grades apart, but and we only lived a couple of streets away from each other. So like geographically and in age, we were close but when violence happens, it kind of like fractures the city. So I'm only really in the part of the city that I'm from, right? So I grew up in Weldon Projects as a child, but like in high school, I never really went there just because like that wasn't my part of the city. And so for me, I think part of it is right. You got to develop tough skin and also I think it's an intimate piece of it to where I think if folks see you, if you come around, if you have a type of sincerity, right, you can vibe with people. And so yeah, so that's like the complicated thing to where it ain't a lot of folks, so it's a real intimate space, but it's also concentrated poverty. So all the things, the crime, the violence, you gotta navigate that in like these real sophisticated ways that yeah.
Yeah, and how we were talking prior to the interview about how rural life in Black America in the South doesn't really get talked about other than the standpoint of civil rights movement and folks making the great migration, where you're going north,
Yeah.
Midwest, or West, but you don't hear the stories about those that didn't have the means to relocate. And I was born here,
Yeah.
I'm gonna die here. There's no other place for me because that's all I heard from family members growing up that ended up moving away and coming back to
Mm-hmm.
visit. It was where one family member would set up shop in some area. You go stay with them till you get on your feet, and you return your favor to the next family member that wants to relocate.
Yeah. I mean, and to me, I mean, not to romanticize it, but to me, I think it's something beautiful in the idea that I live in the same place my granny lived. My granny lived in the same place her granny lived, who was enslaved there, to where even despite the horribleness of kind of what happened in the rural South, like as we think about slavery, we think about Jim Crow, to where my granny ain't let white folks run her off the land that her granny worked, right? And it is idea that we keep the South alive and possible. I think the South is intimate to Black people, and some of us never left. Some of us like thugged it out and we struggled and we made life there. and we held on to the land that our ancestors toiled on. And to me, I think it's something beautiful in that. But the complicated part is, so most Black Americans, right, regardless where they live at, Cali, Chicago, can trace roots back to the rural South.
Mhm.
And part of what I say is, look, part of being Black and rural and Southern is not being able to trace a lineage, because you where your ancestors were enslaved at, and you don't really know where you were before the South. And so I think living on this land really forces you to think about home in these intimate ways, to where I can't trace anything past Weldon, North Carolina. Like I don't know where my ancestors existed before here, in a way that I think other people got access to these different migration stories. So where my story is just it was always here.
Right. Have you seen the documentary Silver Dollar Road on Amazon?
I haven't. Oh,
Yeah, it's a good doc. It's about a black family down in, I think, I want to say Beaufort County or Carteret County. They own a
okay.
piece of waterfront land down that way, and how folks in the city was trying to say, you're in eminent domain. This is our land. And two of the
Mm,
family members ended up going to jail because they said, you're not going to move us on this land that was passed down from our family. And I believe the matter has since been resolved, but it's a good documentary that you should check out. Is Silver Dollar Road on Amazon. I believe Viola Davis was one of the executive producers on it.
okay.
But how when you were talking about, people standing out and not moving off of the land, it makes me think about all the beautiful property on Lake Gaston. How some of those
Yeah.
people, once word got out that it was a summertime destination, a lot of them took that upfront money, and we know what's going on up on the lake.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Nah, yeah, and I mean, yeah, it's a complicated thing, right? To where I think part of what I want to do in the book and in the text, and just kind of like my orientation in general, is kind of show that today, or like this question, like when does a moment end,
Mhm.
right? To where what has to happen for today to be any different than yesterday? And part of kind of what I keep trying to do is like make similarities between like antebellum, like slavery, and kind of what happens in 252 today. To where like one of the biggest things that I think is similar is most Black folks don't own land in the 252, just like we didn't during slavery, but we worked that land. And in part, right, is where right the USDA kind of like agribusiness essentially kind of stole land from Black folks in the 252 in the 50s and 60s. I think like Tillery Farms is like the big kind of like national story, where we think about folks whose land might become valuable, right, might just sell it, not kind of knowing, right, what it's going to be worth 10 years from now. And so for me, it's always thinking about what does it mean to be of and from a place and say, this is my block, but I don't really own it. Right? And for me, I think Black folks in the 252 give us like a different orientation with land and with space and with home, to where I think capitalism would say your ideal relationship to a thing is to own it and to have it in your name and to make money off of it. And
Mhm.
I think the people who I know don't necessarily own the 252, don't necessarily make money from it, but they love it deeply because they found different ways in which to relate to land, to relate to space. And yeah, and so just kind of thinking about what stories do rural Black folks give us that right shape how we all can imagine the world. I think to me that's like an interesting story about what does it mean to build home in a place that's violent? What does it mean to build home in a place that you don't really make money from? That is actually a really horrible place, but you find beauty in it anyways. And yeah, and I like our ability to kind of do that, to build home in ways that kind of push back against like capitalism.
Yeah, there's beauty in the struggle, because I was saying how the only thing I really needed to have a fun birthday party back in the day was somebody brought the stereo component set outside, or book a shelter at Emory Park, get you store-bought
Right.
cake, some non-name brand soda, and you had the playground right there. That was it. If somebody turned on K97.5 and you were good.
Yeah.
That's
Man,
that's
like
all that matters.
that, and I mean, and again, like I ain't trying to like romanticize it because I think right, it is rough and tough, but just yeah, like exactly what you're saying, like our ability to kind of take the smallest of things, right, and do something grand with it. Where like, yeah, to me, I think that's dope, right? And
Mm,
I think it points to like our genius, right? Yeah.
right. Yeah. So where did you end up going for undergrad?
So yes, I went to Western Carolina University in Cullowhee for undergrad, and then I went to Morgan State, my HBCU, got my master's, and then Virginia Tech for my PhD. So yeah, so I've been like in the southeast like most of my life.
Yeah, you weren't at Western Carolina at the same time Keon Carlson was there, right?
No. I was there before he got there. Yeah, and I had
Okay.
already graduated.
Okay, cool deal, cool deal. Keon Carlson,
Mm.
fellow 252 native from Garrisburg, won the Super Bowl with the New England Patriots,
Yeah.
currently on the Miami Dolphins. And just thinking about him, Nazir Jones, Kentron
Hmm.
Balmer, and prior to him, Cedric Jones, who went to Weldon, Delaney
Hmm.
Rudd, who went to Eastman, and how, we have a lot of people from 252 go on to play in professional sports and seeing how now a lot of athletes from our area is really getting exposure through a
Hmm.
lot of AAU programs and going to top tier schools. And, now they're really saying, hey, because when you think of athletic talent in the 252, you tend to think of the basketball pipeline that comes out of Kinston. But
Yeah.
everything outside of Kinston is now getting shown through now in the league. We had Kent Bazemore out of Bertie County, Bam out of
Hmm.
Bio, out of Little Washington. You had Kobe White out of Goldsboro, Jimmy Graham out of Goldsboro, and just how really, that side of the state is really starting to get its just due athletically. Because when you think of athletics in North Carolina, you tend to think of 919, 336, and 704.
Hmm. But I appreciate this a lot because nobody ever talked to me about sports, and I love like basketball. Like that's my thing. But
Duke
since
of
I don't write
Carolina,
about
which one? Tar Heel or Blue
it,
Devil, which one?
so whitest thing about me is that I'm a Duke fan. Like
Oh,
that's like
I'm gonna let that slide, and I'm gonna let you be in a Charger slide. Tar Heel born, Tar Heel bred. When I die, I'll be Tar Heel dead. But carry on.
man. Wild enough, I actually had a job interview at Chapel Hill, and yeah, I made it to the final stages. I was a runner up, and so I was gonna be a Tar Heel, but they ain't offer me the job. But nah, yeah, like Duke fan, and this just might be me hyping us up, but we have a lot of dope, amazing athletes from the 252. Like you already kind of like mentioned the names, you mentioned the Kinston pipeline, and and to me, like sports is just like an interesting way to think about the world. Because if you think about what sports are we good at, we out here hooping and we play football. And then, but it's like nothing in our DNA that would just make us good at like hooping, right? But to me, it speaks to a type of like access to where shit we probably like take over lacrosse, hockey, but for those type of sports, it's like a high entry fee, right? You
Mm,
need equipment, you need access to facilities. With basketball, I could walk around Weldon today just with nothing, and I would see a person shooting hoops in a goal, right? And then this idea about how the space itself like lends us opportunity to develop certain skill sets. And like for
mm,
football, we just need a football, right?
yep.
It's hella land there. And then so you think about why are we so good at these sports? And part is because like if we think about the structure of these rural spaces, well shit, like these the things that kind of make up our world in a way that like at Weldon, we ain't had no kicker. Like to develop so our football team, we going for 2 points every time. Like we ain't got no kicker. Because like to
Mm,
get good at that skill takes a certain set of equipment and training that we ain't have access to. But you know what? We do play hard, we do hustle, right? And thinking about sports just as a kind of window into these like larger things. And I think the reason that we produce so many good hoopers, so many good football players it's because we get shut out from so many other avenues that if we only get access to a couple of things, right, we committed to it. And
yeah, yeah. Like you mentioned, how with hockey, lacrosse, baseball, you get priced out before even gaining the interest in the sports because of all the fees. Documentary called Black Ice that you should definitely check out about the black folks' place in hockey and how that's kind of sort of been erased from,
Mhm.
Canadians' history. But, black folks have had a place in hockey. So do your research, people. And Jim Brown, RIP, the great Jim Brown, also played lacrosse when he was at
Mhm.
Syracuse, when he was running back at Syracuse University, and how, when you're playing pickup football and how you mentioned you had a wide space of land, you pretty much go to whoever's house had the biggest yard, get a couple of your boys, knock on the door, can so and so come out, y'all go out, y'all play. There's a water hose out back. When you're thirsty, sip that water hose, go at it again.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, and I think, and part of the narrative is oftentimes we make it seem like, oh, just black people just naturally good at these things. Like, no, it's actually kids who have discipline, who are committed, who use these things to build community, who actually sacrifice a lot to become good at these sports. And I think that's an interesting story of the rural South, to where folks, young people, are kind of reimagining, right, how their bodies move, and doing it through sports. To where in the book I talk about my favorite sports movie, White Man Can't Jump. And like the line where like the white dude, right, is telling Sydney, where like you rather look good and lose than, right, just look bad and win. To where he's saying, "Oh, you all flashy," right? And to me, I feel Sydney, because Sydney lived in the hood. He worked for this white dude who he couldn't, right, be himself, right? He had all these demands, and on the court was the only time Sydney could have character. He could be flamboyant, he could like be beautiful. And I
Mhm.
think it's something about how sports allow black boys and girls like to get access to beauty in ways that it's like we shut off from in these other arenas.
Right. And now with NIL, kids are getting big old bags to go and get beauty. And when you think
Get your
about Sydney
money.
Dean and being flamboyant and beautiful, boy, if college prime time had access to NIL during this time, boy, he would have been
It's,
making so much money. But Shador and Shiloh, they're making so much money hand over fist off of NIL. And Colorado is
mhm.
kind of giving me North Carolina A&T adjacent vibes.
True. Yeah, I think about, so I played against him, John Wall. So he played a word of God. He was there in Weldon. We played him. He dropped like 30 points in the first half and then didn't even play the rest of the game, like blew us out. But I think
Mhm.
about like him and his college career, to where he has like the world, right, doing a little flex stance, and thinking about like the charisma he brought to the game, like his style of play, his energy, and yeah, and in a moment to where if NIL was a thing when he was in college, to where, because what a lot of black athletes, particularly from the South, do is they good at the sport, but they also like culture creators. Like they're kind of bringing in a type of aesthetic that's important, like not only for the sport, but for like how we do life.
Mhm.
And yeah, and I think they should make money off that. Like,
Yeah, because for years the NCAA was eating off of the kids, and in order for them to play for that school, they had to sign that intent saying, "We own your name, image, and likeness forever in perpetuity." So up until recently,
mm-hmm,
whenever you saw Christian Laettner, the shot over Kentucky, he didn't get paid for that. Whenever you saw
mm-hmm,
any of those other moments, they don't get paid for that. So thank you, Ed O'Bannon, for that ruling, and I'm glad that EA Sports College Football 25 will be dropping in a couple of months. That's why I gave my PS4 that Soul Stone sacrifice, like when Thanos did Gamora, and I am
yeah,
waiting patiently for that. And how you mentioned, seeing John Wall playing against John Wall when I was at UNCG, Davidson was in the SoCon conference before they
mm-hmm,
went to the A10. So I got a chance to see the chef, Steph,
yeah.
when he was cooking. And I was like, man, who this little bitty boy looking like he's still playing on JV? Like, could have been more like 150 soaking wet, but his range was grown. And it's
Mm-hmm.
crazy to see how, because of him, it's a revolution in ball where forget being like Mike. I want to be like Steph.
Yeah. Yeah, like, man, like, And now with the whole analytics, like, yeah, his play style is like change how basketball works. Like I mentioned John Wall, to where now a player like John Wall, it'll be difficult for them to get a spot on the NBA team because it's really the star player and then shooters and defenders around the star player. But a player like John Wall, it's nah, give me the ball, I'm gonna go get a bucket, right? Right, one way or another. And and yeah. Yeah, and at Western, we started in SoCon, but yeah, and so I saw Western play Davidson when they had Curry, and it wasn't even fair, right? You could tell like Curry could be anywhere in the country, but he was just running through the SoCon.
Yeah, and it's crazy to think that his dad, Dale's alma mater, Virginia Tech, your alma mater, didn't even offer
Mm-hmm.
him a scholarship, not even a spot to walk on.
And it's yeah, I mean, because to your point, right? I think we hadn't yet seen that yet, what he was bringing to the table, and it's kind of hard to like put something that's new and innovative, right? It's hard to kind of pencil that into like a game plan until you actually see it, and I think when people saw it, right, it's like, oh,
Yeah, so Virginia Tech, what's the difference culturally in Blacksburg as opposed to when we think of VA culture, we tend to think of either DMV, the Northern Virginia side, or
mm-hmm.
what's coming out of 757 Tidewater, Hampton Roads area.
Man. And I think if I was from Virginia, I would probably write about this, but I think VA is one of the most complex states geographically. So Blacksburg, near kind of West Virginia in the mountainous region, it kind of feels like West Virginia, right? All the stereotypes and assumptions you got about what West Virginia looks like, that's Blacksburg. Northern Virginia, like Alexandria, is like the DMV, right? It feels like that kind of metro political space. And then 757, right, has its own kind of like culture. And then the 434, so you think about Emporia, that feels like the 252. And
Mhm.
this idea that kind of is multiple Virginias kind of like working in unison. So for me, like folks in Emporia, maybe all the way up to Petersburg, right? They sound like similar to folks from the 252 in a way that once you get out to the Northern Virginia, right, it's just a different type of Virginia. And so yeah, so I think Virginia's like an interesting space to think about, right, culture and kind of like how culture kind of moves and
Yeah.
exists in one particular state.
They'll correct you in a minute when you try to say Henrico County. No, it's Henrico County. Henrico. Henrico people. I'm not from that part of VA, but I know it's Henrico. And how you mentioned the 434, big shout out to Keldon Johnson, who's currently on the San Antonio Spurs roster, went to
Yeah.
Parkview out in South Hill. And of course, from there you had Trey Songz out of Pittsburgh, Tampa
Mm-hmm.
Hannock, Chris Brown, and Tyra had the hit Country Girls from Petersburg, and Moses Malone from
Yeah.
Petersburg. The late Jerome Kersey was from Bluestone, Virginia. Other 252 athletes. We had Buck Williams, played at Maryland, played in the NBA for years from Rocky Mount. Phil Ford, Carolina great from Rocky Mount. The late Coach Boone from Remember the Titans from Rocky
Mm-hmm.
Mount. And how, I didn't know this until recently that Rocky Mount was split between Nash and Edgecombe because I spent
Huh.
most of my time on the Nash County side
Yeah,
over by
yeah,
the
yeah.
mall. I just went to the mall, went to KNW. That was it. And how for us in our part of 252, we thought going to Rocky Mount and Golden East Shopping Center was big time, especially going to Cayman's. Cayman's, for those of you that's not from 252, Cayman's was the urban outfitter where a lot of, shall we say, street pharmaceuticals would go shop. And I would just go just look, and I would see that race car jacket on that mannequin. The race car jacket. I still want one of those. Thinking I'm gonna wear this to the Daily Herald Holiday Classic, and I'm gonna show off.
Oh man, that's why I love the 252. Like, I think if you ain't from it, you ain't people ain't
You
gonna
you gotta
appreciate
you
what
gotta
you
know
just
it.
said.
You gotta know
What
it.
you just said.
You gotta
Like,
know it. You gotta be there to understand.
yeah. You used to go to the stockyard.
Nah, but I heard about it though. A lot of clothes are bootleg though, but that's where I got a lot of my mixtapes from, either Stockyards or Sugar Hill Fashion.
Mm-hmm.
Cause I think that's where I got my DJ Cool the Professional Part 2 CD at. Sugar Hill Fashion. Sugar Hill, baby.
Mm-hmm. Man, and then almost so folks, people might disagree with me about this. Now, I think something about being from rural spaces, and I'm thinking like pre-internet, because now like you can get on Fashion Nova, whatever, whatever. But I think since we only had a few places to shop, we had to be kind of extra imaginative about carving out our own style. So if only like 3 stores, like we all don't want to go to school with the same thing on, and so it's like we then kind of put our own spin on
Mhm.
the few options we have, and yeah, and thinking about man when I went to like Golden East Mall, it's like I'm in a city now. It's like I'm big time.
This ain't Crabtree Valley Ball. You better learn how to make a meal out of that outfit from Style Set on Super 10.
Right?
I never went to
Oh
Style
man.
Center, by the way, but I know some of you wore them button down samurai shirts. I know who you are.
Don't even pull no pictures up. Like, I need to go
Hold
delete
on,
shit from my
were you one of
Facebook.
those kids that had them samurai button down shirts?
I think I have one.
Nah,
Man,
I had one of those, but the big fashion trend though, it was 7th grade. We went to DC for our class trip. We took the bus up. Everybody went
yeah,
and brought Saucony's, and they were like mad cheap too. Everybody
yeah.
was rocking the Saucony's, and now with seeing how 2000s is considered throwback, and seeing high school
Mm-hmm,
kids now wearing Mitchell and Ness,
mm-hmm.
South Pole, Mesquite, all the stuff that when we were teens was hot. For them, that's retro.
Yeah, like,
I'm not
and
washed.
and I refuse to call it that because I ain't old. But yeah, I remember like the big like we used to wear like them big tees, but like remember the Jeezy the Snowman t-shirt?
Oh
Like
yeah. Oh yeah. When the school found out it wasn't talking about Frosty, they banned those real quick.
it's like but not and again like thinking about like the music in it, man, where it's like well, I say so like you know how people be like, oh, millennials, Gen X, Gen Z. Like for me, I think that don't really kind of get to my experience. Where I think those are kind of like these like white centered ways to kind of mark time. And I say like us, our generation, I say we part of the trap music generation to
Mhm.
where with a trap music era to where like we born like late 80s, early 90s. So we literally here at like the genesis of trap music and we kind of live through that evolution. And so for me in the South, right, that kind of shapes my orientation in music to where we have the trap sound coming out. We got like the snap music, hey, lean with it, rock. And it's like in the shape and style, the shape and dress. And for me, like that's how I mark time to where
Mhm.
if you used to dance to Laffy Taffy, right, you part of like my generation.
I hated that song
And
when it first came out, man. When I first heard it, I was like, man, what in the world is this? I mean, I cannot look at a Chico stick now and think about those snaps and Fabo coming on through the track screaming, but we were the last generation, I feel, to really grow up with old school analog and really come in
Mm-hmm.
at the birth of digital. Because, we were using them
Yeah.
gateway PCs, getting those free
Yeah.
AOL trial disc, using Netscape as a browser, and really got to see the evolution of technology to where now you got a computer at your
Mm-hmm.
fingertips on your phone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, because in our moment, right, I think they'll say that's the fastest that technology's ever changed. Right. And so I remember playing, like you mentioned, like 97.5 and having a cassette tape and recording songs on my cassette tape. And I also remember downloading songs on LimeWire and putting it on a CD. Right. I also remember having ringtones and ringback tones. And now I got like I got iTunes on my phone, right? I
Hold on,
can just
so
play whatever song I want.
yeah, so
And right
you
and kind of
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I was saying you was probably calling Jamster for those ringtones. You were risking antiviruses on your computer using LimeWire, Kazaa, BearShare, Morpheus, and
Mhm.
hoping somebody didn't pick up that phone because you didn't have a DSL cable modem yet because
Yep.
you were waiting for about 5 hours for one song to download.
Yeah, like we went through it all, right? And and now, right? And just think, I even had like a. I remember when I had a no skip like CD player, like that you can walk around with the CD player, put the headphones in it, and to me that was like technology in a way that yeah, I feel like we lived through so much technological change, and we adapted to it,
Mm.
right?
I was wondering, did you ever frequent the skating station when they had those dances?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember like the song I remember is like I like the way
Oh,
you
Sammy.
look at me. Like, yeah, that's what I always remember when I think about the skating rink.
Yeah, man. But for those that don't know, it's now a church, but it used to be a skating rink when we were kids. And back in the day, a certain promoter would run dances out of there. So you would get all the kids from the area, whether they be from Northampton West,
Mhm,
Northampton East, Weldon, Southeast Halifax, Northwest Halifax. They'll come through and there'll be a good time until somebody started fighting the parking lot and they'll spill over by big lots because I
mhm,
when I went quite a few times, that's when I knew it was the rap because somebody from some hood, I don't know if it was Lincoln Town, Hodgestown, Broadertown, Hook Road, or Cal, Florida, or whatever. Somebody did something and a fight was to be ensued. You remember the song
mhm.
Shorty Swing My Way by KP and Envy, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, you know
yeah.
Envy's from Weldon, right?
I did not know that. That's
Yeah,
wow.
yeah, she
I
from
did not.
Weldon. So little fun fact. So she came to my school, Gaston Middle, to perform when I was in sixth grade. And this was right around when that song was like hitting. And
Yeah.
she was saying she was gonna drop a solo album, but I guess nothing eventually came of it. But just for the fact that for her to be from our home area and with that record being as hot as it was at the time, I'm like, yo, this dope and this fire, and want to transition to Southern hip hop, how when we think of Southern hip hop, we tend to think everything that came out of Atlanta, that comes out
Yeah,
of
yeah,
Atlanta. But you
yeah,
have your different pockets of Southern rap. You have what's going on in Memphis with 8 Ball MJG, 3 6 Mafia,
yeah.
Houston with Ghetto Boys, UGK out of Port Arthur, everything out of Rap a Lot. And then, of course, where you are in the 504, No Limit,
Mhm.
Cash Money. So can we
Yep.
talk about the impact of New Orleans rap and how once No Limit and Cash Money exploded nationally, it took
Mhm.
their regional sound to where even Housewives in Des Moines, Iowa, know that when Juvie say taking over for the 99 2000, I need some butts twerking and I need some hips
That
gyrating.
like, like how you just said twerk, right? And everybody knows that word. That word didn't exist before like bounce music, right? To where I don't even think the word existed when I was a child, but now it's just like an everyday word. And for me, I think New Orleans hip hop is so central to music that I think we take it for granted. To
Mm,
where we think, oh, twerk music or like the way we kind of like dance on each other, it was just always there. But it was kind of birthed here, like twerking and being ratchet and how Southern hip hop, New Orleans in particular, right, to me now is hip hop. And so this isn't really the question you're asking me, but I was on Twitter and and people get me heated because I think people say, "Oh, well, rap is dead," or "Rap isn't about any hip hop isn't about anything anymore. They don't talk about anything anymore." And I think part of that argument is because of the South taking over hip hop. And I think a lot of it is grounded in a type of anti-Southern bias to where the sounds that the South produces, right? I think New York are kind of like antithetical to it, to where like conscious rap to some folks is like the epitome of what hip hop is, in a way that I think if we looking at New Orleans, bounce music gives us a different relationship to movement in a way that conscious rap just can't do. Where I think about like Atlanta trap music and thinking about my book opens up access to different type of frustrations and emotions and anger that I don't think conscious rap can do. And so for me, I think Southern hip hop is really kind of looking at what's going on in our reality and then trying to speak to that in ways that push back against the respectability politics of the civil rights movement. To where I think like in the South, it was always about manners and be respectable and don't act a fool because white folks in the South are gonna judge you. And I think hip hop in the South creates a new space to where I can be ratchet, I can be ghetto, I can trap, I can shake my ass, and I still deserve access to humanity. And for me, I think Southern hip hop is doing that complicated work. And that a lot of people don't want to reckon with the fact that, man, I can listen and trap and I can get a PhD, I can shake my ass on Sunday and write and go to my job Monday. And it lets us think about our flexibility and who we are as like Southern Black folks.
Yeah, like you said, you can straddle that line where you can track the scar, but also say never would have made it at the same time.
True.
Yeah, and when Andre 3000 said the South got something to say at the '94 Source Awards, the South is still raking shop, making noise, and we just lost just recently Rico Wade, one third of Organized Noise, and how
Mm-hmm.
their production work that they did on Outkast, Goody Mob, TLC, all the associated acts out of the Dungeon Family really put Atlanta on the scene rap wise. But I didn't really think about this point until it was brought up not too long ago that really I think what kicked off that movement before all the Atlanta rappers caught on, if you think about it, Criss Cross and ABC.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, yeah. I mean, and similar to what we was talking about, I think the South had a type of style, right? An eclectic one that folks, right, wasn't ready to kind of reckon with. And so if I think about when I think about Outkast, even though I think like folks typically kind of imagine them kind of like tethered to like a type of like Atlanta history, where for me, I think Outkast and folks before them, right, opened up a type of rural aesthetic to where like if somebody think about like the future, right? In the future, what we see is like big buildings, flying cars. Right? I'm watching an Outcast video, and it's like a type of Afro-futuristic video, but they got fields and dirt roads in the future. They got Southern accents in the future. In a way that, right, okay, I know Southern Black people are gonna live and be in the future. But I think oftentimes when I think about what does the future look like, I think urban centers kind of shape our imagination. I think what Outkast was doing was, nah, country Black folks are gonna be in the future too. And like, is there like a space to kind of think about the future, to think about sound, and to think about the South as not kind of backwards and stuck in the past, but the South is always evolving and giving us like new entry points to think about what does it mean to be modern? Is
Mm,
modern having an iPhone 15, or is modern right? Can be modern, be congruent with the rural South,
mm.
and
Yeah, because I think, prior to them, a lot of folks just thought of, Southern rap as slow and what was coming out of Miami with Uncle Luke and Luke Records, they was all Doodoo
yeah,
Brown and ratchetness and, just thinking about how far the South has come hip hop wise and to where rap is the number one genre of music in the world. I mean, this year at the Olympics, we're going to have breakdancing in the Olympics. And just to think a genre that started as out of the ashes and rubbles of what was going on in New York in the late 70s by black and brown youth. So shout out to our Latino, Latinx brothers and sisters because they were a part of the
hey,
movement too. And how now you could go to any country in the world. They don't know a lick of English, but they'll know a rap
mm-hmm.
record.
Yeah. I mean, and that storytelling to me, I think is so much to that in a way that I'm not even sure I fully reckon with the weight of that. Where you thinking about folks who are being, and so I don't think I spelled this out in the book explicitly, but hip hop developed simultaneously, right, as right mass incarceration. So when we
Mm,
think about the historical timeline, and so we talking about we gutting funding to school, so it ain't no instruments, like these like loitering laws, so like kids can't just hang outside, and essentially like criminalization of black and brown youth, and like who could? It's just no way I think folks could have imagined that under those type of conditions, people create a sound that just change how we do life, right? So if we're thinking about DJing as being part of, right, say hip hop, or kind of like how we imagine like what a DJ is, how that works. I don't even care if people listen to hip hop or not. You go to events with DJs, and right, and you got to attribute that to what those black and brown youth are doing to kind of reshape space and technology, and how even though they didn't like invent those right instruments, so like the turntables and things like that, but they used them in ways that people who didn't invent them, right, wouldn't have imagined that these pieces of technology would be used this way. And yeah, and to me, right, this is just Nikki Giovanni, right, where she says, right, where so if we look at like in North Carolina, South Carolina, where like drums were illegal, like how folks like we like we can't drum, we clap our hands to where shit we can't afford a car. Like when I walk, right, I'm gonna have some nice shoes on my feet, I'm gonna have a nice bop. And thinking about how we created style in the face of unimaginable conditions. And to me, right, I'm just proud to be part of that legacy.
yeah, and then just thinking about the hip hop scene in, North Carolina, we had other acts that came before this group, but to me, when you think of North Carolina hip hop, one of the first acts that come to mind, you think of Little Brother,
Mhm.
because they were, when social media was just in its infancy, the listening dropped in '03. Then Minstrel Show came out in '05. And for me, it took a
Yeah.
minute for Minstrel Show to grow on me because I have just a soft spot for the listening. But the Minstrel Show, definitely a well constructed, well pieced album. And the satire of hip hop culture and entertainment industry at the time was definitely like went over the average casual music fan's head. Cause they're kind of like
Yeah.
what you got to do now with Kendrick's diss. It's not, first off, forget your chick in that click you claim. It's where you really gotta sit, observe, and unpack and do a couple of re-listens. Like, oh, that's what they were
Yeah.
talking about. And I think Little Brother was doing that on a lot of their stuff.
Mm-hmm. And so many so since I've been here in New Orleans, like I've had a chance to kind of meet folks, right, who right part of like No Limit Records. And a consistent thing, whenever I like interview a music artist, is hip hop inspired them to take literacy serious. To where I think people don't realize like what Little Brothers and what other folks are doing, it's like really intricate type of literature and communication work. And then you do gotta re-listen. So like when I'm reading like a theory paper, it's like shit, like I gotta reread paragraphs over and over to really get the meaning of it. And I think hip hop, right, even beyond the dope sounds, I think speaks to our engagement with doing language in complicated ways. Like even to me, even trap songs, right? To where I think sometimes people are, oh, it's not like a conscious song. They're not talking about anything political. But if you put somebody in the studio and said, make a trap song that can go viral, that's just really difficult, right? And so part of what makes like hood music good is you have to be able to speak to a particular type of emotional experience. And
Mm.
so even if the lyrics themselves, right, aren't that complex, I think the emotional work is, and I think yeah, and so like folks like Little Brother, right, gave me an appreciation that black folks do language in really complicated ways, and that you just can't pull up and think you're gonna know what these songs about. You actually have to write, work, and think and struggle, and yeah,
Yeah, and how you mentioned how to make a trap song go viral is difficult. The other day, I'm Serious by Ti came on, and I really sat back and listened. I was like, oh, dope record, but it's a record to where only those that's of that life would catch on to, and it didn't have that national appeal, which is why I felt it
Mm.
didn't take T.I. until Trap Music Urban Legend to catch
Yep.
on nationally. But the I'm Serious album was more of a regional record where you heard that Georgia, Carolinas, and probably maybe VA
Yeah.
if you're lucky.
Yeah. And I mean, and that's the complicated thing about hip hop. I mean, I'm gonna say being black and a creative person in general. You can be a writer, you can do art. I mean, visual art. You can be a podcaster. And I think if you want to be major, part of what's often demanded of us to make our work legible to broader audiences, right? And I think
Mhm.
part of what happens in that process is we lose some of the nuances of it. And so, like in my book, right, I'll shout, or I might write a line, and the line is just verbatim from what's that like I'm a gat toting pistol holding like what's that song called? Why
Nuck
am
If
I
You
tripping?
Buck, Crime
Yeah,
Mob. How do you not know
right.
one of the top five
Like
fight starter songs of all time, which
right.
was used in the trailer for the Knuckles miniseries? Shout out
Right.
to Idris Elba, who's the voice of Knuckles, aka Stringer Bell.
Know what? I lose my Southern black card, but like I would write a line from that song just in the book, and you got to know Nuck If You Buck to know what it is, right? But if
Mhm.
I would explain it where it says, okay, this is like the number one fight song in the world, like this song does, like it'll be corny, right? If I had
Right,
to explain it, right, to
right.
make it legible to people, and I
Mhm.
think part of what we do then is I think our artists, the folks I like who resonate with me, part of the reason why they resonate with me so much is because I think they speak to me. And I think when their audience becomes wider and broader, sometimes like some of the nuances can is a potential for those to get lost.
Mhm.
But yeah, but I like the Ti album. So
Yeah, definitely that. Then of course, after Little Brother, you had of course Petey Pablo came out with Raise Up, which is
hey.
still the North Carolina anthem to this day. Take the shirt off, twist around the air. I mean, he didn't say Northampton County, he said Halifax, but we were like close enough. We'll claim
Yeah.
that too. And then of course, 252 native out of Snow Hill, Rhapsody she'll have her new album, Please Don't Cry, dropping on the 17th. So, and then of
Mhm.
course, Fayetteville native J. Cole, who is looking like the smart one in the room right now after bowing out of the Drake and Kendrick beef. He's like, I'm gonna tag myself out. So can we just talk about the evolution of NC hip hop,
Yeah.
like I mentioned, from Little Brother, and then of course, where now we're
Yeah.
seeing J. Cole and Rhapsody.
Yeah. And so in my in my book, I part of what people wanted from me was like, what's a North Carolina sound, right? So if you heard this particular sound, like what would that sound be from North Carolina? And part of it is there isn't like one sound, right? To where if we think about all the artists you just listed, and then if we throw in right local artists, right? So how I like G50 from like Weldon, where it's not like a coherent sound like to like Atlanta trap music, but
Mm-hmm.
I think it's kind of like this creolization of right different sounds and influences. But I think it comes together in a coherent North Carolina. For me, I think it's a type of like North Carolina politics to where I think they signify and shout out North Carolina and it does a type of work around North Carolina people. And so yes, I mean I think North Carolina hip hop evolves right in complex ways where like it's easy to hear like the New York influences on artists like Cole, Rhapsody. You can hear the right the Atlanta influences, right? If you think about like a the baby, like how do we box the baby? Like if we had to name what his sound sounds like, and so for me, I think the artists that we get from North Carolina is like a diverse range of sounds, a range of politics, and then I think it kind of speaks to the state itself, right? The state is like huge, and then I think we have different commitments, like different lifestyles, and and also, and I think the idea that for something to be of and from North Carolina doesn't pigeonhole it into having to sound one particular way. To
Mm-hmm.
where when I hear Cole, when I hear the references, when I hear the slang, when I hear right? The way he pronounced certain words, I hear North Carolina in it. Same with Rhapsody, right? So where even though they can sound different, they can both sound like North Carolina. And
Mhm.
and to me, I like the complexity of North Carolina hip hop because it ain't just one thing.
Yeah, I agree because going to college in Greensboro, the hip hop scene in Greensboro totally different for the Triangles music scene, different from Wilmington, different from Charlotte, different from Greenville or other pockets of Eastern NC. And then of course 828 is on its own vibe with the culture, with the bluegrass and
Mhm.
Appalachian, and with the tie-ins to country and blues and hillbilly and everything like that, and how I don't know if you know, but on Texas Hold'em, Rihanna Giddens, formerly of the Carolina Chocolate Drops, she had played
Mm,
violin on um, Texas Hold'em, and of course, she's from North Carolina as well.
mm.
Yeah,
Man, like you got all these. I feel like I'm I'm about to lose my 252 card. Like you hit me with all these facts. I was like, oh shit, I didn't even know that. Nah, oh man, like you making me feel, I don't know, proud to be from the 252.
yeah,
Not
man.
saying that I wasn't, but
Yeah,
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 I
yeah,
love
man.
this.
Yeah, yeah, man. And I want to circle back to Virginia Tech and how athletic wise, of course, you have Bruce Smith went to Virginia Tech, but when we think about one of the culture setters for today's NFL athlete and the modern quarterback, you know who I'm talking about here. There were others before this man. There was Shaq Harris, Doug Williams, Randall Cunningham, Cordell Stewart, but
Mhm.
number 7 from
Yeah,
Virginia Tech, that
yeah,
man was a whole problem.
yeah.
And also at the same time, when he was in the league, another 757 native, also from Bad News, aka Newport News, was setting the league on
Mhm.
fire in the NBA. So can we talk about the cultural influences and impact of Michael Vick and Allen Iverson?
Wow. Okay, so I'm a 76ers fan because of Allen Iverson. Like I had braids because of him, like my plate. Yo, I really like this question. People don't ask me these type of questions. Like, yo, like, oh my god, like, so I'm gonna start with the Michael Vick one first and kind of transition into the Allen Iverson piece, to where Michael Vick right, and I'm not gonna say anything new, but for me, kind of like revolutionized not just the quarterback position, but how we think about football position just more broadly, to where I think in, so basketball, you playing both sides of the ball. I think in
Mhm.
football, it was this idea that you have to be really, really, really good at one particular aspect of the game. And I think Michael Vick, right, gave us a recalibration of that, right? So of course, like he's quick, fast, like he can throw heat, and just this idea that, so if I think about like Travis Hunter now, to where he can play both sides, this idea that, right, the same type of intellect that goes into kind of scanning the field to make the pass, right? That same type of genius can be used into kind of like the running and just like the flair of it, to where my man had like mirrors at the bottom of his shoes. So like when he run past you and you fall, you can see your reflection. Like that type of like aesthetic thought that went into it. And similar with Allen Iverson, to where the way he played the game, to me, is just beautiful. To where, and again, I keep using that word because I don't think black men in the South get to use that word enough about how our bodies are. And like when I see Allen Iverson with the crossover, like with the fadeaway, like to me, like that shit is like art. And I think they give us access to a type of masculinity that I think the world wouldn't want us to talk about our bodies that way. They want us to just to be like these brute athletes, that we're strong, we're fast. But I'm gonna say, nah, man, we beautiful, we got skill, we got grace, because that's the only thing Allen Iverson, like Vic are doing, right? They playing the game with the type of grace, the type of finesse. And yeah, and so I appreciate them for giving me access to a type of masculinity that's right, that's dope, that's beautiful, that's artistic, that's creative, and so yeah, I appreciate both of them for that.
Yeah, and Michael Vick, man, as a Panthers fan, he gave me fits every time when we played him, especially that one game in Atlanta where his knees seemed to levitate in the air and there was a touchdown. But while we're on the subject of Carolina Panthers, shout out to Julius Peppers, who will be going into the
Hey,
Pro Football Hall of Fame this year. First Panthers homegrown to go to the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and he's a 252 native from Bailey, North Carolina. Southern Nash, shout out to the Firebirds.
hey, Rick, you need to put together a document like with the 252 folks. Right, all this needs to be, or we can make a website like in one place because I don't think. I mean, I think like we kind of know like in two like yeah, like, we know a whole bunch of folks from 252 do dope things, but I think having like a central location that students can get access to where
Mm-hmm.
like people don't think about like the 252's influence on say Tupac, right? About like his mom, right, having spent time here, or thinking about like Ella Baker, who to me might be the most important civil rights activist, right? Who kind of organizes everything for Dr. King, who kind of sets the blueprint for a Black Panther movement, was
Mm-hmm.
born and raised in Littleton, North Carolina, right? Goes to show you, and just students can see that the 252, right, shaped the world. And yeah. And so I appreciate you shouting out all these folks.
Yeah, but I didn't know that she was from Littleton. I didn't know that.
Yeah. I know her one of her parents were and just spent like a little time here.
Mm-hmm.
So not like not most of it, but spent time. Oh, you talking about Ella Baker?
Yeah, Ella Baker.
Yeah. As a young girl, yeah, that's where she
Nah,
lived in Littleton, North Carolina.
nah, I didn't know that. And of course, Tupac's mom spent time in Lumberton before
Yeah.
moving up to New York. And I think attorney Ben Crump, originally from North Carolina, and then ended up relocating elsewhere. But like you were saying, a lot of people tend to have roots down here in North Carolina or other places in the South. But of course, when they migrate, you tend to only maybe go back every once in a while when you still got family down there and everything like that. And
Yeah.
then, of course, as we know, the meshing of hip hop and R&B, where you get singles wanting to dress like hip hoppers, started with a little group from North Carolina, Casey, JoJo, Dalvin, Devontae, Jodeci,
Yeah.
of course, their cousin,
It's,
Fantasia.
mm-hmm. Yeah, like nah, and to me, I think this because part of and part of kind of what we talked about earlier to where I don't think people take serious kind of rural black folks kind of contribution to the world to where I think we kind of think about hip hop as this like urban phenomenon where it's like nah, right, it has southern right roots also, or I mean influences, and when we think about contemporary black culture, like the rule rarely comes into that conversation. And I think, right, part of what we're doing now is kind of like a recalibration of that, to where
Mm-hmm.
like the rule just ain't like slow, backwards
Right,
country bumpkin.
right,
It can be those things, and those things
right.
aren't inherently bad, but those things slow, backward, country bump, or whatever folks say, right? I think those things can be done in a way that's dope and influences right how urban spaces work. And yeah.
Yeah, because I remember a couple of years ago, it was when the Patriots played the Rams in the Super Bowl, and how the Hurl had a big old spread in the sports section about the Battle of the
Mhm.
252 with Keon and Todd Gurley, with Todd Gurley
Yeah,
being from Tarboro, and how, somebody from the 252 was going to come on with the ship, and how, Tarboro, when you think of Tarboro, you think about the Vikings and their dominance in football and how they just run shop over there are, how some people 252, they don't say Tarboro, it's Tarboro. Tarburl, Tarboro. And like how I was mentioning earlier, how it's good to see now the athletic side of the 252 finally get shine, get exposure. And then of course the one big joker that we can claim is that the greatest basketball player of all time, even though he was born
yeah,
in New York, he was raised down in the 910
yeah,
23,
yeah,
Black Jesus and Sneakers, Laney High
yeah.
School, 6'6", University of North
Hey,
Carolina, Michael Jeffrey Jordan.
yeah. And we think about a whole state, a person is going to have to stretch their imagination and say that North Carolina has produced the best basketball players in the world. Like you really gonna have to kind of stretch your imagination to kind of make argument against North Carolina to where we kind of hoopers and yeah,
Mhm.
and I love it for us.
Yeah, I mean, one revolutionized the game where you get everybody wanting to dunk. Another one revolutionized the game because everybody is wanting to shoot. But I think a lot of the younger kids that's growing up now, they don't understand how big of a deal the first iteration of the Hornets were. When the
Hmm.
Hornets hit, starter gear with Hornets was hot currency in these streets. I mean, you had Larry Johnson, Lonzo Mourning, Muggsy Bowles, Dale Curry later came on. And then, of course, we can look at it in hindsight, RIP Kobe, but we drafted Kobe.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and I think like my boy was always Baron Davis when like
Oh,
a little
B
later,
if B Diddy would have been
right?
healthy, B Diddy would
It's
have been a whole problem.
it's yeah, like when we talking about like shooting the deep three, like explosive, it's yeah, and and yeah, and just like the Hornets, like the colors was like dope, and it just felt good. I wasn't even a Hornets fan, like I said, I was a Sixers fan, I still am most of my life, but just I would wear Hornets gear just because it looked good, right? Is all I mean, I think like what Hove did with like the New York, right, fitted. I think that's
Mm,
in like a different type of just
mm,
like fashion, right, level.
yeah,
But I think that Hornets gear, hey, folks didn't know nothing about them North Carolina, but their Hornets gear was, hey, it
yeah,
was a cultural staple.
yeah, those purple and teal jerseys. Y'all need to bring that back. We just need to get you a dye of Carolina blue in your collection, and it will be good. And with you being down in New Orleans, you got the Pelicans. Of course, you got Zion from South Carolina, and then of course you got
Mhm.
252 Kinston native Bi Brandon Ingram, who
Yeah.
went to that other school down the road. But it's just being, why does he look like he smoked a pack of Black and Miles before every game? I mean, his pictures, he look all sleepy and high, like where the gut spots at though.
That's I don't know. Hey, but that's why I love his game. But that's funny, right? And like the hair always half braided, half done. And I don't know. I think I don't know if I was a hoop, and that's interesting though, because when I look at like the women players, the
Mm,
women like they be like looking like put together, like the men coming in like shit, it's whatever, and
yeah,
I don't know why be looking like that.
yeah. Speaking of the women's game, WNBA is going to capitalize this season off of all of those stars that came into the league.
Hmm.
Not just Caitlin, but Angel Reese, Camilla Cardoza, a lot of the other ladies that come out, and I think they're going to have that turn where it's going to be talent spread out across the board to where
Hmm.
you want to watch the league as a casual fan. But another person who I think will be a problem once she gets in the WNBA is Flage, and
Oh
who
yeah,
plays
yeah,
at
yeah,
LSU. I've been a fan of hers since she was on Rap Game when she was a kid. Her dad was a rapper,
yeah.
Camouflage,
Yep.
and I believe Boosie is her uncle.
Okay, I know that was her uncle.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think she's related to Boosie, but she got bars, and how we mentioned with New Orleans with Bounce, No Limit, Cash Money. It seems like New Orleans is one of those cities where one wrong turn, you get that look, but hey, what's going on? You heard me? What you doing over here, Wody?
Yeah, I feel like 252 could be like that too.
Yeah, yeah, especially to go through Lincoln Town or wrong part of Weldon, especially if it's one way in, one way out.
Like, yeah, and,
Yeah,
and I think yeah, and so yeah, like if you look like you don't belong, like yeah, well, oh, shit, what they owe? And here, yeah, I think here, honestly, I think it's more like white folks who like touristy and look like they easy to scam. I think I feel a little bit more worried for them. Where it's like, okay, like tourists probably have cash on them, have money, got, and then they probably in the street drunk. And I think like they easy to kind of
yeah,
finesse.
yeah. You about to go that snow on the bluff treatment, like in the opening of the joint where he like, where you stay? I stay around the corner. I'm like, you about
Hmm.
to get set up. You about to get set up. You about to get
Mhm.
set up because, like you said, you could spot a mark a mile away, but certain folks know that I need to be out of here before the sun go down. Because once the sun is up and once the cops is out on the French Quarter, I'm okay. But once the sun go down, when the cops is gone, and when it's Fat Tuesdays, whoo, that's a recipe for trouble, trouble, trouble. But I want to ask you this: being from 252 in North Carolina, and you going to Tulane in Louisiana, and knowing that Black culture, Black life there is totally different than Black life in North
Mhm.
Carolina. Of course, being down there with the influence of the Cajun and everything being down there. What was it like
Yeah.
for you being an observer of another difference of Black culture than the one that you grew up in rural North Carolina?
Yeah, and I think it kind of solidifies something you said earlier, right? There's just it's multiple South, and so as a scholar of the South, as a person who, right, my Southern identity is kind of like part of me. Is it is nice to see the differences and the similarities and kind of like how the South is done. So here, where folks might can hear my accent, like, okay, he from the South, but he ain't from New Orleans, and this idea that, right, still having kind of access, or like me having like a type of Southern aesthetic, but not like a New Orleans type of aesthetic at all. And yeah, and so for me, it makes me think about when I say that I'm Southern, like what is it that I mean, right? Because my Southern is different in here, is different in like Alabama, Mississippi, and thinking about just like if there are so many different Souths and so many ways to do it, what when we say South, kind of like what's the linking thing between us? And yeah, and it just gives me like access to think about those questions differently, and it makes me appreciate home. To where I think when I was in 252, sometimes stuff we do just kind of feels normal, and it doesn't feel like a cultural thing. It just kind of feel like shit, this is just kind of what we do. And then kind of being out of that, I can see things that we do that are just kind of particular to us, that when I was there, that I it didn't feel particular. It's just kind of like I know. So yeah, so just kind of having my word reflected back.
Yeah. And knowing that the Super Bowl for this upcoming season is going to be in New Orleans. So, Rock Nation, if you are listening, I need to get a reunion with Cash Money, the Hot Boys, and I need No Limit on there too, because this is what the folks been wanting. We want a Cash Money, No Limit thing. So, Jay Z, Rock Nation, please make that happen for the Super Bowl. But I did hear that the Hot Boys are going to be reuniting for Essence Fest. That's what I've heard.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh man, that'd be dope. I'm planning. So I typically do like events during Essence Fest, but I've never like attended like the actual like performances. So I might this year. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
so
didn't know that.
Essence Fest, from what I've heard, it's an experience where the girls get together and guys want to come down there too and go to the performance of Essence Fest, even though, some of
Mhm.
the seminars and stuff is catered towards our females, but the performances is for everybody.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Nah, it was the other year for Essence Fest. They had like a Southern hip hop day. I think it was like the hip hop 50th,
Mm.
and folks was mad because it wasn't no New Orleans artists. It was all like mainly Atlanta rappers, and it was like because like Essence, right, isn't right run by people from New Orleans, right? It just happens in New Orleans, and it was this idea that yeah, how you having a 50th hip hop Southern hip hop celebration, but you ain't got no New Orleans folks. It's like mainly like Atlanta folks, and so it's like a big thing. The other year where,
Mm.
but no, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And if you've been down that way, have you come to have a newfound love and respect for the tradition of the Bayou Classic between Southern and Grambling, and then of course the Battle of the Bands between Southern and Grambling?
Yeah, I mean, so I mean, yeah, like in a way that it reminds me. So like, I'm saying like North Carolina to the core. So I'm thinking about like A&T,
Hmm.
Central, Live, like, and I think I got emotional connections to those. Yeah, but I think it's dope to see how the state shows up for their HBCUs and to be part of that, right? To where even though I don't think I have like the same emotional connections like Southerns or like the HBCUs here, like I do like back at home. Because I think to me that's the interesting thing about North Carolina, to where whether you went to the university or not, right? Whether you
Mm,
graduated or not, I think we feel connected to those
right.
schools because like there are schools
Mm,
and yeah, and so it
right.
made me appreciate like so like Central, I would say it's like my HBC, even though I didn't go to Central, but I'm connected. Like I would cheer for Central like in sports over like A&T and Liz. And yeah,
Yeah.
it made me appreciate, yeah, though my state a little bit more.
Right. And the thing about HBCU culture and NC has the home to the most HBCUs
Yep,
in the country. And,
yep.
with the work Chris Paul, native of Forsyth County, doing with HBCUs, with Winston-Salem State, and of course Stephen A., an alum of Winston-Salem State, played basketball under the late great Clarence Big House Gaines, and how wherever you go in the country, there's always going to be somebody related and linked to an HBCU, whether you know it or not. And is Greek culture different in that part of the South as opposed to in NC?
Ah, man, that's a good question. So yeah, so like I'm a Catholic, right?
J5.
And and I will say it's I was gonna do the thing where I hype up my organization. I ain't even gonna take that route. I think it feels similar in some ways. And I think for me, maybe because I'm getting older. So I think the differences I see now, it's hard for me to know if it's regional or just because like I'm the old dude now. To where to where I think I see like a different aesthetic, a different type of like performance, like the way they kind of like step and things, those things are changed or different. They do like different type of events. And so I don't know if it's the regional difference or if it's just kind of Greek life kind of evolving. And so yeah,
Right.
so that's like something I'm struggling with now. Like I'm 33, so I'm a
Mm,
little older, and so like
right.
I'm not like young in the mix as much
Right.
anymore.
Right.
But
Right. Yeah, you ain't out there twirling and shimmying as much, but
oh
I
yeah,
know
yeah,
y'all
yeah,
were
I got
hyped when y'all saw
like
the two Kappas back in Usher at the Super Bowl halftime show. I was like,
yo.
somebody's probably saying, let's make Usher honorary Kappa, have his line name be Cold Confessions.
See, with us, right? So we the only organization who we don't do honorary members. So you got to do it. But I will say, when I saw them come up, one because Usher's my favorite artist, right? To me, Usher, I don't even if we could put R. Kelly in it, Usher to me top R. Kelly. To me, Usher is my Mike. I'm gonna put Usher over Michael Jackson. People can disagree with me, but I grew up on Usher. And when I saw the Kappas, and I was like, yo, like I didn't like a tear didn't come out my eye, but it was like that type of arousal to where I was like, man, that shit is like dope and fire. Like
Mm.
random fact, like I rode like we were talking about the skating rink, so I skate, and I started skating because of Usher. Like I took classes to learn how to like to do the dances and stuff, and when I saw Usher and like two noobs up there, bro, that was better than the game to me.
Yeah, like I said, y'all was hyped. Yeah, you definitely was a part of that Wave Cat Wednesday crowd with the sporting waves and all of that good stuff. And quick disclaimer, folks, I am not Greek. I know a whole bunch of folks who are Greek. Shout out to everybody in the D9 and my pops Alpha Phi Alpha. So shout out to
Okay.
everybody that's D9, and don't throw up them signs. Don't throw up them letters. Don't wear no nails if you're not a part of that organization, because there's been cases where some Greek members will put their stuff in the thrift store. You see some folks who are me by me wearing those three letters and three colors, knowing good and well ain't Becky, ain't no DST.
Oh, you got me thinking about your boy Boosie now. I'm like,
Oh yeah, because he had on some of y'all stuff, right?
yeah, like
But
beefing
but
with
but
the
Wipe Me Down
whole
is
yeah.
probably a good stroll song for y'all though.
Oh yeah, so it's like so he don't get a pass,
He
but that's our anthem though. That's our anthem right there.
Yeah, man, because I learned the hard way my undergrad at G. I went to a nightclub, I think it was Sigmas or Q's, one of the two. And they were strolling. I ain't move out the way quick enough. I got bopped. So next time I went out, I'm like, as soon as I saw one person start, I immediately moved because you don't see no cues start doing their thing until why must I feel like that? Why must I chase the cat?
Mm-hmm.
Nothing but the dog. Yep, they will start
Mm-hmm.
hopping. If it's just one person, they will do that all by their lonesome. Just as
Yeah.
long as
Nah.
Atomic Dog is on, they will hop
Yeah. Nah. Hey,
and
man.
bark.
Nah, I like they can do like solo and that shit be fire. I feel like for us, like we
Y'all got to
shimmying
be in the
going
group
slow.
for y'all, because
Yeah,
one
like
Kappa shimmying and cane twirling ain't gonna be as good looking as about 5, 6 of y'all, especially if y'all got a light one like from Appaloosa somewhere in the back that's shimmying cane twirling. Because every time I see Russell Wilson, I'm like, he look like he could either be a Kappa or an Alpha. He kind of got the complexion of a Kappa, but the mannerisms of an Alpha. You know what I'm saying? Shout out to Russell Wilson from Richmond. And man, it's just crazy just to think how Opelousas. Keon Coleman from the Buffalo Bills, he's from Opelousas. He went
okay.
to Michigan State for 2 years, got drafted by the Bills, and he had his introductory press conference. And he was explaining to them the fine art of shopping on the street because he was wearing his little jacket. And the reporter asked him
Yeah.
where he got it. And he was like, nah, Macy's. Hey, he was running down prices and all that. He was like, I'm putting them up on game. He was like, I'll take you there personally.
Uh,
Now, when he said I'll take you there personally, I don't know if he's gonna set me up with somebody or you literally gonna take me down there personally. So that was one of the fun things that went viral during the NFL draft. And also Xavier
yeah.
Leggett, Panthers draft pick out of Mullen, South Carolina. People were out there calling him Black Boomhauer because that's
Mm,
a different type of accent with him coming from the PD region of South Carolina near Marion, Florence, Latta,
yeah.
out that way. And people saying I was like, man, he probably know how to cook a whole hog, put on a black pot of Brunswick stew, and work on the car on the side of the house that probably had liquor house music going.
Yeah, man. Right. I love that about us though. Like I love that because in the South, like we got all this open space, so we ain't going to the shop. We going to the nigga who got a whole bunch of cars lined up on the street, working on the side of his crib.
Mm-hmm.
Right, we got some good. Like my grandma, like she used to cook dinner like in the morning, and it's like it just on the stove, just like simmering all day. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I love that about us. Hey, oh, a random question:
Yeah.
why, whenever a person ain't from the South, do a Southern accent, they do like an 1850s slavery voice? Like it's never
I,
like,
I, I don't know, man. It's like y'all been watching Gone with the Wind a little too much. I mean, we ain't that old. I mean, you still living like you still following the Halifax Resolves, my guy. For
like
because thinking about now, with Halifax and the Halifax Resolves, I'm glad nobody took me to Halifax for no field trip because like how one of your people in your book mentioned, even though it wasn't explicitly said, you kind of read between the lines and kind of felt like, oh, this space ain't for me because
yeah,
we
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
knew in our area what spots was kind of like, I don't think I need to be over there because we don't like your kind around here type of vibes.
Mm-hmm. Ah, yeah, and a person ain't got to say it. You can just your body senses it, right? You can just feel it to where, like,
Mm-hmm.
like I don't even know what they call it anymore. It used to be like that a Piggly Wiggly in Gaston.
Oh, cut. Oh yeah, it's Gaston Market. Well, folks still call it Red and White, but it
Yeah,
used to be a country club on the side, Chattahoochee
yeah,
Country Club.
yeah. Like I've never been there, right? I passed it one night, like it was like jumping.
It
I
was
was like,
bumping
you know what?
too.
I was like, maybe I should go in, but I already knew, right, what
Yeah,
it was
you
gonna
knew what time
feel
it was, but like we talked about Beyonce earlier and how Beyonce is now integrating those honky tonks to where you can see some folks twerking, bouncing like the twerk team out in Nashville, and the doom 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 doom, they gonna have a
like.
conniption fit, boy.
Yeah, like, because I think people don't realize that black folks in the South, like, we like country music. We've been wearing like cowboy boots. Like we like be out like
Riding the
that's part of
horses.
our culture. Yeah, but I ain't going up in that spot because even though I might like a couple of the songs,
You know what
my
time it
black ass
is.
ain't gonna feel in play. Like I'm just not gonna feel comfortable enough. Like maybe
Yeah.
if I had a couple of shots, they're like, okay, like fuck it, I don't care what y'all think.
Mm,
But and I think for me that affective piece is so important because people can be nice to you, kind to if the vibe ain't right, it don't really matter about like those formalities, those exchanges. And so I
mm,
think about how can we get the vibe right to where maybe we can have those type of like interracial connections to where I think in the book I talk about in the rural South, it's hard to have that same level of segregation that we might see in like urban places because if it ain't number one damn grocery store, I'm gonna see white folks at the like we just gonna kind of pass each other, kind of like
mm.
doing life and like what would it look like for us to not just pass each other but see each other, like to connect
Right.
with each other and yeah, but not saying that I just want to be friends with white folks, but just saying that I think black people deserve access to all of the 252. And I
Yeah.
don't know if that can happen if we feel like we don't belong in certain spaces.
Yeah, and how you mentioned, being in urban areas, you have a lot more space to spread out where you could be a little bit more isolated and being
Mhm.
segregated where you don't need to go on this side of town for anything because you got everything that you need. Whereas in
Yeah.
our area, you're gonna cross paths day in and day out because I remember my mom telling me when she was a little girl, certain restaurants back home like Oscars and Runner Rapids,
Yeah.
Rangers
I,
and Weldon, it was where you weren't coming in unless you were going through the back or they had a window
no.
where you would order your food. You couldn't go in and have a seat, but
Yeah.
it's crazy, with Halifax County, we have three separate school districts in one county. One,
Yeah.
two, three. Warner Rapids graded schools, Halifax County schools, Weldon
Hmm.
City schools. Two out of the three school districts in one county, predominantly
Yep.
black. But Runner Rapids graded school district, all the money is getting funneled to Runner Rapids graded school district
Yep.
because if you're from Gaston, Garrisburg, or the surrounding areas, you got to go to Runner Rapids to do everything, and you're
Yep.
putting money back in Runner Rapids pockets.
Yep.
Whereas, with Northampton County schools and Halifax County schools, Weldon City schools, you're getting totally underfunded
Yep.
because you're not
Yeah.
able to keep the dollar circulating in your community.
No, yeah. And when I talk about it in the book, like I'm really talking about a type of Jim Crow process in 2024, right? Because that's all it is. It's just we're gonna maintain these sick and even and it's weird, right? And then it's so if you think about where Walmart is, technically that's Weldon, but that money, all that shit goes to Running Rapids, right? But technically that is Weldon. Like people who live in the trailer court right beside Walmart, they go to Weldon school. If you live right behind Challenger Middle School, you can't go to Run Rapid City Schools because all Negroes back there, you're gonna go right to and kind of the way we divided it up, right? Part of it don't even make sense like geographically, but it's a way in which to kind of maintain resources for the white folks in the county in a way that that income itself, right? Okay, income is important, but there's a bunch of poor white folks in Runner Rapids,
Yep.
but they have a fundamentally different experience than poor black people in Belden because of the access to resources, right? And it's a way in which that even though like black and white folks might be poor, they just have different experiences because of how we draw up the lines, the
Mm.
where funding goes, who gets access to a rec center, who doesn't get access to a rec center, and it's the same logics of Jim Crow. And when we tried to integrate those schools, basically saying there's only 200 some damn students at Weldon High School, why can't we just integrate the schools? Right. The quiet part that they didn't want to say is we don't want these Negroes coming to Run Rapids. Like that's what it all comes down to.
They don't want no seasoning in their food. Let's put it that way. Cause I know the homecoming, boy, if they put Weldon, mix it up with the Runner Rapids, boy, That
It,
homecoming would be fire. Because I think about now for me, this year has been my 20th year high school reunion, and how
yeah,
technically my high school is not in existence anymore because Northampton County has since combined East and West for
yeah,
Northampton
yeah,
High, and how, a part of that tradition is lost now, with the merging
yeah,
of Northampton East and Northampton West, and how, you kind of lose a sense of that. But
yeah.
like you mentioned, with redlining and, the county commissioners drawing the lines, that it's an intentional way of keeping folks out. And I always say this, it kind of feels like Vegas is always set up for the house to win, not for you
Yep.
to win. They'll let you get a little bit to let you think that you're winning, but you ain't gonna take the whole money and run, because they're gonna always find a way to keep the house to make sure that they win.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and you make a good point too, right? To where, yeah, so say if like Weldon, right, if all the Halifax um schools kind of integrated, I would miss having a standalone Weldon school, right? I think I like being able to go back to my high school and see my school, right? And and so part of it is about this idea that how can we make all schools viable places for folks? Because I think schools, particularly in the rural South, aren't just about education.
Mhm.
That's where we get entertainment from for the sports, right? When Weldon played West in the basketball game, the city out, right? To where schools are about community too.
Mhm.
And how can we invest in schools in a way that it does right by the community where we cool, like students go there, but it's also those things are important for
Yeah.
just like the cultural, right, geography of
Yeah,
space.
agreed. Since you went to Weldon, answer me this: who was that man that always came to the games that always carried a stick?
Mr. Pulley. Yeah. Mr. Pulley. It And it's like folks like him to where you would think Weldon was the damn Golden State Warriors to where
Y'all
like
travel deep.
type of commitment, right? To me, one because like we ain't got access to like college sports like nearby or like a professional team, but we do got a high school. And these kids work hard and they play well. And it's like a sign of community. And then like they had the dances after the school, I mean after the games. Nah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Because I remember when West made it to the state finals in '05, the rest of the community was out. Runner Rapids came to show support. Weldon came to show support.
Yeah.
Even though your school wasn't in it, you were supporting the school that was next to you that was in it.
Mhm.
And I remember too, Southwest, not Southwest, Southeast, they had this one dude that would always come with them. He would be clapping all the time and standing up. And but if Northwest and Southeast were to merge, they'll still be trashy in a way, because we never really played Southeast and Northwest because they were 2A schools. But I know now they're 1A schools. So we pretty much
Mhm.
played Weldon. We used to play Bunn and Franklin, but they moved to Runner Rapids conferences to 2A, and some other schools. But man, whenever we would play y'all, man, if we had to go to Weldon, it was keep your hammers on, running duck, because somebody will try to throw something at our bus.
Man,
Because y'all was our second biggest rivals of it outside of East.
yeah, I mean, and because like the interesting thing is since the area is so small, everybody already know each other,
Yeah, we
right?
knew
Like
everybody.
it's like we just go to different schools, but I know y'all like we date the girls at West, and they like, and everybody know each other, but yeah, and I like that about our area to where sports matters profoundly for community and yeah, and like, and how can we, yeah, because I don't think the solution would just be kind of like keep merging schools, but how do we invest in the ones that are there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely put some resources. But Northwest, Hollister. 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 Yeah, Hollister. Northwest Halifax, definitely good for that. But our area is rich in culture, rich in sports, rich in tradition. So what do you think? And I want to close you out on this. What do you think
Mhm.
it would take to have a reimagining of life in 252 to where people can be able to feel where I don't necessarily have to move away in order to
Mm.
make a life and only come back when it's time for me to retire or see my folks, with them getting up in age and anything, everything like that.
Yeah, I mean, so part of it, I think, like, so like the economic piece, like, so where my work, I think is going to be like the central question, right? And so maybe remote work might make the 252 a more viable option if I can work from home and live anywhere and it's like cheaper. And and I think people want to, I think if you're not from there, it's hard to have a type of social world to where like if we from there, like we can just go kicking in the backyard and chill. But thinking about bringing people in, right? So say if I get married, right, my person might not want to live in 252, and then so thinking about like what type of, how can we just develop these like cultural centers? So well, that can be like museums, like different types of restaurants, or essentially, I guess what I'm trying to point to is taking 252's identity and then kind of building institutions around that. And then so I
Mhm.
think it's certain things that we offer that you can't get in other places. And then how can we then build right types of like cultural spaces to just kind of build on what's already there. And that's gonna take and then like a huge financial investment, but also I think like a an emotional one to where I think people are gonna have to believe that this place actually deserves to be something different. And yeah, and then I think and part of what you're already doing, like that's why I said, oh shoot, maybe having like a centralized location where people can kind of access the 252 and like small initiatives like that, I think can build a type of community profile that can get people excited about coming who might not be from there. People who are here might just want to stay and invest and be part of kind of right this legacy building that we doing. So yes, I definitely think about economics. Like, can I live here and have a living? And also, is it culturally valuable to where I get a full experience where I don't feel
Mhm.
like I'm missing out on anything else, but it's actually something unique here that I get and allow me to do life in a particular way that I can't do life somewhere else.
Right. And the bonus too, we're seeing with a lot of transplants from other parts of the country coming to North Carolina, especially since big tech is looking to make their way into the triangle,
Yeah.
areas outside the triangle, and how you're seeing folks in and around those areas getting priced out of neighborhoods that were once desirable that they now got to move out because big tech is coming. And if you ain't got six figures, you can't
Yeah.
stay. Look at the Boys in the Hood clip when Lawrence Fishburne was talking about gentrification and F gentrification in the words of Giancarlo Esposito and Do the Right Thing. And just do you think with all of the changes with the transplants coming in that North Carolina is kind of losing its southern charm to where we have people from up north and out west saying y'all? And I'm like, no, we've been saying y'all before y'all got here.
No, yeah, and then I definitely think like when people go to Charlotte, oh, Charlotte doesn't feel like the South, right? I don't hear Southern accents, and I do think in these various places where we see a whole bunch of folks coming in and kind of taking over, displacing other folks, I do think things are being lost um, in a way that it hasn't hit the 252 like as major as say like a Cary area or Raleigh area. But yeah, I mean, and that's a difficult part, right? To where when does a place become something different?
Mhm.
And or is it just kind of how places just always change? And then so yeah, so I think like for me the question is asking how can we hold on to the essence of this space while still like growing and becoming modern? And yeah, that's a tricky process.
Yeah, and just don't build a brand new Waffle House with 100 sanitation grade because I would not be eating there. Your Waffle House sanitation grade has to be at least 80 or below. The syrup has to be sticky. You have to look like you're on work release or on supervised probation, and you got a gold cap or no teeth in your mouth, and you got to go to the Waffle House that's to the left of exit 173 or to the right of exit
Mm,
173. But your food would taste better if you go after midnight. If you know, you know. But I don't know if you know this though, that Bojangles, they're starting to expand outside of the Southeast.
Yeah. I'm
Yeah,
excited about it.
yeah.
I hope it tastes the same in other places. They need to build one in Louisiana.
But nah, they hype everybody hype up the chicken supremes from Bojangles like they crack. I never had the chicken supremes. My go-to is always either a three-piece, double fries, and a tea, or Cajun filet biscuit, bow rounds, or a sausage biscuit, bow rounds, and a tea. Now, I know I heard they putting one in Cali. I know they're gonna try to do vegan bow boxes.
Oh,
Put Splenda in the tea, so you know the tea automatically is gonna be trash.
you know
Now,
what?
the one I need though, I need cookout. I need
Mhm.
cookout ASAP. So I get a cheddar chicken tray, fries, hush puppies, either cheer wine or tea on my seasonal eggnog milkshake in December. Because if you go to cookout for the first time, I'm telling you, for everybody that's never been, know what you want before you pull up to the board. I'm gonna say it again. Know what you want before you pull up to the board. Because
Google the menu.
for us regulars, we ain't got time for you to be sitting around like, wow, there's so many options. What can I get here? I'm like, no, just get what you're gonna get and go on. Kind of like the same thing. Like if you go to Ralph's Barbecue in Weldon,
Yeah.
I get the buffet. Don't get the buffet. They got everything you want on the buffet. Same thing with like Second Street Lunch. It's simple: burgers, dogs, fries. The breakfast is fire. Abner's breakfast is fire. Now that's the one thing I really hope rural South don't lose is like the mom and pop traditions of
Yeah.
restaurants and stores, because we're seeing a lot of that losing because when mom and pop gone, kids or whoever don't want to take over and they end up
Yeah.
selling it, just like how, in Dorchester, you have Smith's, which is the red and white out there, and how it's a staple in that community. And of course, with our area, folks drive up to Dorchester, just a short drive up 95, and just go up there and get your meats, get your special Christmas candy. And how, like you're saying, with a lot of the transplants coming in from outside, we tend to lose the charm of what makes the South special.
Yeah. Ah, yeah. And I'm still stuck on they trying to have some vegan options at that Bojangle.
Man, if they could probably try to do some Impossible Chicken or some type of stuff like that, like a kale smoothie. Can I get a kale smoothie with my three-piece Impossible Chicken with some Impossible mashed potatoes and dirty rice? I'm like, no.
Impossible match.
No, no, you can't. You cannot get that. It's going to be deep fried. It's going to be fattening. It's not going to be good for you. You're going to shut up. You're going to
Yeah.
take it, and you're going to like it. Just like how out here, Carl's Jr. is owned. Carl Jr. and Hardee's are owned by the same company. So Carl's Jr. they have Hardee's breakfast on the menu. So I get a little bit of taste of home when going to Carl's Jr. Kind of get my
Yeah.
sausage biscuit like at Hardee's at 6:30 in the morning. All the elderly people be hanging out at. But Hardee's. I'm sure you probably know it was founded in Greenville, but they had their test kitchen out in Rocky Mount.
Oh, no. I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
Yeah, they had their headquarters out in Rocky Mount until the company that owned Carl Jr. brought out the company that owned Hardee's, and they moved headquarters to
Mm.
St. Louis. So of course that's a nice little North Carolina tie, for Hardee's, and you can't get Hardee's fried chicken everywhere. You can only get it in Southeast
Wow.
Virginia in our part of North Carolina. Because when I first went to Greensboro and saw Hardee's, I was gonna get me a two-piece snack, right? And they were like, "Nah, we don't
Yeah.
have no fried chicken." Like what?
Yeah.
Like what? What is this? What y'all doing?
Shut this down.
What you doing, baby? No, no, baby, no. You got to make sure the hot apple pie, if you get it from Hardee's, is fresh. Just like how you got to make sure your beignets is fresh. If you ain't had
Hmm.
beignets, best thing you will ever have in your life. But you got to make sure it's fresh. Because if they've been
Hmm.
sitting out for a good minute, nope. And it's gonna be messy because that powdered sugar will make you feel like you Al Pacino and Scarface on that desk.
See, now you got me hungry. So once we get off this call, I'm going to get some food myself. He got me hungry now.
All right. So since on that note, we can go ahead and wrap. Any shout outs you want to give and tell people where they can find the book.
No, yeah. So the book, shoot, you can just Google my name and vibe, and the book will come up. It's on Amazon. Anywhere you buy books from, it's gonna be up there. It's through University Press in Mississippi. And yeah, I just want to shout out. I'm not even gonna do individual people because there's just too many people. But yeah, I just want to shout out, man, the 252 to the people there, to the grass, the rivers, the air, anything, anybody who ain't afraid to live and love and have life in the 252. I appreciate you. And yeah, and appreciate you for like taking time to kind of talk with me. This felt like I don't know, a homecoming. And so I appreciate this. And yeah, and I'll be in the 252 in a few weeks.
Yeah, man, definitely feels like being back home, pulling up on somebody's porch and watching the cars go up to the lake. Like, okay, they from
Yeah.
Jersey, they got their RV in their truck. Oh, they from New York. Or it felt like watching all the cars and the bikes go by, like they're going up to Edwards Beach for Bike
Mm-hmm.
Fest.
Yeah.
Man, that was a time. That was a time. That was a time. Because I always hear from my older cousins, Lost Boys will always come down and perform at Bike Fest. Because they say that they would see them over at the mall. And you know how
Mm.
small our mall is.
Yeah, yeah,
So they
yeah.
had the nerve to have a directory in the center. And I'm like, you can just stand in the center of the mall, you can see everything. You can see everything at the mall. But you can catch this interview wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube at youtube.com/beyond the album cover. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a big thank you, round of applause for Dr. Corey Miles, author of the book Vibe, Black Rural Aesthetics, and give me the rest of the title.
I actually changed, so now on the actual published version, I'll just hold it up real quick.
Yes, please
Yeah.
do. Yes, sir.
Yeah. The
There it
sound and feeling
is.
of Black life in the American South. Yep.
There it is. Get it wherever books are sold. Take a look. It's in a book. Shout out to LeVar Burton. And thank you, Dr. Miles, for coming on Beyond the Album Cover. And I definitely hope to do this again with you soon.
I appreciate you, homie.
Yes, sir.